It is 8:58 on the 31st of December 2021. Welcome everyone to the MTT News of the Week. Of course, it's evening still in the US. Welcome, Jen.
Glad to be here.
Great. So it's our last stream of the year, the end of the year for everyone. And we will be covering the news of the last week, as we always do. So thank you for joining us. And please, if you are watching, please like, share, subscribe. We'd like to grow our audience and try and buy more access to more news things. So more news channels for you to read and share, and more information for you. But this week we obviously have some great stories to cover. Firstly, obviously, we'll be talking about Omicron and some news regarding sort of its severity, as well as some of the cutbacks and sort of the effects that it's had on New Year's Eve celebrations. Ghislaine Maxwell, the trial there, we're going to be talking about that briefly, as well as covering Russia and Ukraine, the tension there. Biden and Putin are meeting, but also some stories about conscription that's happening in Ukraine in relation to that tension. On the 26th of December, it was the 30th anniversary of the collapse of the USSR, so we'll also be talking about that, as well as a group that's been shut down in Russia and the relationship between these two things. The constitution in Chile is going to change. Obviously, this is in relation to the new president, Boric, which we spoke about last week. We talked about last week. We also then have, of course, our news from different communist parties. In South Africa, Desmond Tutu passed away last week, or this week, I should say. And we'll have a message from the South African Communist Party about his contributions to the struggle against apartheid, as well as some messages from the Communist Party of Swaziland, which we had the pleasure of interviewing the General Secretary of this week, which will be on our podcast soon. We'll be talking about that too. The other things we want to mention, of course, is then some interesting news about a slave ship that has been potentially will be unearthed or dug up, I guess, in Alabama, which is interesting. We'll talk about some of that. And then, of course, some charities. So a charity in India that was set up by Mother Teresa. We'll be talking about that. It's been shut down by the Indian government. But let's go straight on to Omicron. Jen, what have you got for us? What's happening in the world of COVID?
Well, the NIH and the British Imperial College have both released studies. Finally, it's pretty accurate because it has been 2 weeks since the world was first alerted to the Omicron virus.
Mm-hmm.
And well, hello to our audience.
Yes, hello everyone.
And it has been 2 weeks since the initial discovery in South Africa, and well, the reliable data is finally coming out that allows us to truly comprehend what is happening with the Omicron virus. Firstly, the study from NIH was an autopsy study of many. I believe it was 22 bodies specifically, which essentially discovered this very disturbing trend that one, the virus, Omicron virus, stays in the body for in a kind of more dormant but still multiplying and destructive way up to 200 days after supposed after infection.
What percentage? So was that on all of the bodies?
220 was the highest number, but all of them were more than 2 months at the minimum. There's the NIH study that people can simply type into Google search and just look it up. There is this diagram of how many days and in what parts of the body has the virus stayed when they were dissected, performing the autopsy. What it tells us is some very nasty things. So, like, for example, in UK, there is this rule that if anyone dies within 26 days, I believe, after infection of COVID, no matter from what, even if it was from a meteor from outer space, it's counted as a COVID death. So previously, that's been made fun of for very obviously logical reasons. How can that be normal, right? But now it's actually the opposite problem. Anything after 26 days is not is counted as not death due to COVID. But in this case, we clearly see that the Omicron virus of COVID-19 surpasses the blood-brain barrier, attacks the brainstem, attacks every organ of the body, leading to blood clots, strokes, so on and so forth. Various uncountable, endless variety of disease because it attacks the endless variety of organs in the human body. And so now it kind of is asking the question, well, is that death from COVID after a patient supposedly recovered, but the virus is still continuing to multiply in the human body? It's just in a less dramatic form that's still literally just eating away at the human tissues, which causes death 100 to 200 days after. After the 26-day mark, that's for sure, right? And we know that in the United States there isn't even anything like that. Our friend Sean, during the beginning of 2020, told me that his roommate, who had like history with like asthma and he smokes a lot of cigarette, just dropped dead mysteriously, and in February of 2020, and the Seattle 911 did not even perform autopsy. They just bagged his remains up and just no more news, nothing after that. So now that for the NIH to come out finally and to do an empirical study on this with it's in its pre-publishing stage, but I'm pretty sure that when the NIH does something like that with 20-something experts, it's going to get peer-reviewed and it's going to get released in its final form. Well, now it's just publicly accepted material fact.
Right. I mean, yeah, it's pretty concerning, as you say, that a country like the US is not, or doesn't necessarily test. Even a country like the US doesn't necessarily test and have the capacity to know exactly what happens to a body after. And as you say, the potential for this the virus to spread like that, or to fester like that is obviously it's a big another challenge to fighting COVID. I mean, and also I think if you think about the fact that this new variant was found in South Africa, I mean, obviously South Africa does have comparatively developed healthcare system, but if we consider that there's the rest of Africa and Latin America and even the US, there's so much that we don't know what's going on. So we don't even know about yet. Right now,
right, it gets even worse from here, which really is making
I think
at least personally, question the fundamental kind of quote unquote common sense of epidemiology. Specifically with the Imperial College study, they found out that the reason that the South African numbers shown less lethality with Omicron is because near half of the South African population has either had natural immunity, vaccine immunity, or both. And that's why it wasn't as lethal. But the fact that symptoms still, at least overt symptoms, because we already understood from NIH that even after overt symptom is gone, the virus continues to ravage the body for at least hundreds of days. But even without that, the virus still, Omicron still displays symptom for a fever, sneezing, coughing for almost a month, which previously is unheard of. Previously, in 2 weeks, you either survive or you didn't. But now it's just this kind of eternal long game, which is not looking good. And the anecdotal case not really anecdotal, coming out of Norway, where I believe it was like a meeting with like a bunch of Google programmers and technicians. It was a Christmas party of 117 people. Really ironic because the variants for Delta and Omicron is also all B117.
So just matches the number.
Yeah,
right?
so the 117 people that were infected in that on that party, Christmas party, all either had at least 2 shots of one of the vaccines, or was infected and then had 2 shots. They were quote unquote super immune, and yet this still happens. So
well, that's what we spoke about last week, the week before. Is the efficacy, vaccine efficacy, which now.
And in the U.S., there was the other case with the, God forbid, an anime convention of a super spreader.
Yeah,
this just brings in so many questions of like how we should even look at this thing. At this moment, I'm not going to make any definitive statements because no one could.
I think you just mentioned the number 117, and the reason that I think we do need to start worrying, or I don't know what the right word is, but
don't ask me.
Pessimistic, I don't know, but is you said the number 117, but in China, so particularly in Xi'an, obviously Xi'an is a major city. It's in the center of the country.
It's a historic city.
It's an historic city. It's a historic capital, right? And that's where the terracotta warriors are. If they've been on lockdown, so they've been on a Wuhan style lockdown, which in China there hasn't been a Wuhan style lockdown
ever
since Wuhan,
exactly
2 years ago, right? This is the first time they've had to do it, and they've recorded 1,117 cases but bear in mind that's between December 9th and December 29th. Now, if you're not aware, in China, the case numbers that you would usually hear are double digit, 50 cases, 10 cases, sometimes just single digit, 5 cases, 10 cases, 9 cases. To have 1,000 cases between sort of 3-week period is unheard of, has not been happening since 2019. So in terms of not having a good start to the year, whether it's Delta or Omicron, I think this is Delta. I don't think this is Omicron that's in
because China is
Omicron has only been because of China's zero COVID policy or strategy, and the quarantine, 2 to 3 week quarantine that you have to take in order to enter the country. They've managed to keep it down, but now this is a Delta outbreak which has got through the net, and it's not looking good for China, to be honest, in terms of opening up. Actually,
so
it will probably be able to hold this spread and hold this outbreak. But the question that remains is, when would China be able to open the border and have an ordinary border? Because it becomes a question of, if you open, you will have a mass infection. That's what will happen. So it's a really tough one. And if the vaccine efficacy is decreasing because of new variants, the whole point about the whole point about vaccinations was that we're going to reach 80% vaccination rate and then be able to open up. If vaccination rates are not guaranteeing safety for the general population as well as the vulnerable population, that entire narrative is going to be undermined. So it's a big question mark over when China will open up.
Absolutely. Sorry, technical difficulties. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. No, you're fine.
All right. The problem is exactly like you said, but the challenges that Omicron brings, very obviously, is simply put it, previously the incubation period was 2 weeks, right? But now, with even though there are some articles about the incubation period of Omicron being shorter, the problem is that the Omicron has now been empirically proven, again, that it can stay in the body for hundreds of days and at least a few weeks after death. So, obviously in the West, that translates into a question of like, are the burials even proper? The kind of burial procedures. Is there even one? Are they even treating the human remains in a safe, biologically safe fashion? There is also news about people catching Omicron during funerals because of the body of the the body of the deceased, and that brings in the question for China. Lockdown, yes, but most of China's cases has been foreignly imported cases.
Yeah,
Right?
imported. Yeah.
So then, what does that mean? Does that mean that we are, as a whole nation, really going to like get people set like all incoming travelers in like 100-day long quarantines to see if they die or not? Are we serious?
Right. No,
Uh,
yeah. I mean, bear in mind, yeah, exactly.
yeah, I mean,
It's unfeasible. At that point, you're talking
right.
about a 4-month stay in a hospital, in a hotel.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just to finish up on that, very
Yeah.
fortunately, Xi'an has the whole incident of COVID outbreak was the result of the negligence and just I guess the laziness of local CCP officials. So then, well, they have been properly dealt with. They have been fired, punished, demoted, so on and so forth. And the new kind of replacement response team is, like you mentioned, enacted Wuhan level intense protocols. So that's good.
Yeah.
But again, from the macro perspective, China now luckily does have kind of the quote unquote silver bullet drugs for the coronavirus and a lot of variants, which is able to just cure the disease in, I believe, within 4 hours, according to some sources in China. So that's
Okay.
obviously promising. But again, it's still the kind of intense human, material, and time resource of making sure that all of a sudden out of nowhere, hey, you people of so and so sector get tested 2 to 3 times a day.
Yeah.
Nobody go anywhere. Mobilizing massive amounts of resources to quarantine and then to feed everyone and then to shut down work. That's it's difficult, even for China. So imagine what it will take to put an end to this for all the other countries of the world.
Yeah. I'm curious to see what happens with this medication that you've just mentioned. Hopefully that is a silver bullet. Let's hope that it is. But also, I think we're going to be talking about Omicron and COVID for a long time. So let's move on to our next story, which will Russia and Ukraine, the tension over there. So Biden and Putin obviously had a call on Thursday, and they're talking about this tension. Obviously we've been talking about this. The Russians have got troops. I do like this thing though. They say the Russian troops on the Ukrainian border. I mean, they're in Russia.
Yeah,
they're in their own country. I think we should mention that. Yeah. It's quite a trick that the narrative. The Russians are on the Ukrainian border in their own country. They're not like, it's not like America doing an exercise drill by South Korea in the ocean next to North Korea or in the Baltic or in Latvia. This is Russian troops in Russia. But yes, they are on the border. There are a lot of troops, over 150,000, I believe, 180,000. But Biden and Putin are talking at the moment about this crisis. What do you, before I do want to hear your thoughts on this, Jin, but I also do want to mention that from my perspective, I think something to remember with this kind of stuff is there is a game at play, a diplomatic game at play. And if you recall with North Korea, they would fire a missile or test a missile. It is known that this is a part of diplomacy, that you ratchet things up, tension, you create something which becomes a bargaining chip or a point that you can peel back, so you can scale it down and you can scale it up. So by testing missiles and firing them into the sea, when it goes into talks, North Korea then can say, okay, we'll stop firing the missiles if you do X, Y, and Z. So it becomes a chip in negotiation. So I do feel that is at play here with the Russia-Ukraine situation.
Sure.
That there is something of that. I mean, obviously, I know there's lots more going on with the geopolitics, but that certainly is something that we can comment and say that when nations go into negotiations, that it's important to come to the table with something to use to negotiate with. But go ahead, Jen, your thoughts on this one. And you've got an interesting story about this Ukrainian conscription that you've heard about.
For me, it's all kind of tied together in one package. It's kind of one of the same things. All the articles that you mentioned during the beginning of this episode, due to simply the fact that we are socialists, and as Marx, Engels, Lenin, Stalin, and Mao has taught us about dialectics, everything is connected to everything else, right? Especially in something that is of this close of a proximity. And we also have to understand, like from the Clausewitzian perspective, where Clausewitz always talks about the military is always the extension to the political, right? So if we simply piece together a few stories to take a look at this, it makes immediate sense. So Russia is cracking down, not just cracking down, has put an end, disbanded the oldest human rights watch organization group that that from the West's perspective recorded Stalin-era crimes against humanity committed by the Soviet authoritarian regime. Well, they destroyed it, which is, I would argue that by far the most socialist thing that the Russian Federation has done. Maybe not the most, but like it's up there in the top 5. That I can say for certainty. So you are. So here we have a Russian state that is pulling this attempt for whatever reason we don't know, because we can't spy on anyone. But for whatever reason, trying to re-legitimize the Soviet legacy and delegitimize the liberal retailing of Soviet history. And so from that, if we truly were to take what Clausewitz and Lenin says close to heart, which is that military is an extension of the political, and all warfare and the military is a class warfare of one class against the other. Typically, it's the bourgeoisie against the proletariat, but doing revolutionary acts in any kind of intensity conflict. That's not Lenin's words. That was my little paraphrase. It can be, and it must be the act of the proletariat against the bourgeoisie in return, because class conflict. So if we take from that it's very clear that so the beginning of this entire Eastern European, Russian, and Union state and so on and so forth has been Ukraine started trying to poke into Donbass again and Crimea again, and then Russia and Donbass and Crimea, the militias there responded, and then NATO responded, and then Russia responded. So if we look at that sequence of events, it was also related to the formation of the Union state of Russia and Belarus, right? So then this gives a very kind of clear timeline of the Russian people and the Russian government and the Belarusian people, Belarusian government, and the people of the region trying to dispel liberalism, reestablish a more socialist and objective and materialist world view of history, of nationhood, and of conception. And then that previously mentioned chain reaction happened, and then migrants in between Belarus and Poland also added to that fuel. And then, like you said, the military tension started playing off, and the kind of old school Cold War games bombers and jets and tanks being used as chess pieces.
Right.
Like we mentioned in that one episode. And so now we have gotten to a point where in those meeting calls, Putin specifically demanded the stop. So like no more NATO eastward expansion, and that was Russia's demand, and then America's demand was basically Russia stop invading Ukraine. But here are the particular things, though. Ukraine has been doing skirmish battles, just according to anecdotal footages. There's no official sources on this, so we can't officially comment on this. But there has been a very, very high amount of footages leaking out of the Donbass region, so on and so forth, of Ukrainian troops fighting, getting blown up by IEDs, and getting shot at by small weapons and also artillery. And yet, the Ukrainian government claims that there is no casualty. At all. I mean, you would assume that a vehicle that doesn't have too thick armor drove by and giant explosion happened. Somebody would have gotten hurt, but no, zero casualty. Right? That's really suspicious. And now Ukraine has gotten to the point where they are including everyone into conscription, including women, pregnant women, and elderly people in their conscription list. And they're also sending basically everyone, even there's a Chinese international student on the Chinese internet that's been vlogging about her experience as an international student in Ukraine. So like at first it was just videos about how the Ukrainian students were exactly like Americans in terms of their attitude against Omicron. And it was absolutely a sight to behold. But now the videos have turned into I am getting sent to military training by the Ukrainian government. They pulled us out of the freaking classroom. Yes, I'm not joking.
An international student?
Yes.
That's crazy.
So she's a relatively short, thin-built girl, too, who's not even a Ukrainian citizen.
Wow.
Yeah, so all these things adding up, I mean, it's... You put the 2 and 2 together. It's called people are trying to it's called the former Soviet lands are trying to break away from liberalism and reestablish their own people's history. And NATO really doesn't like that, and they're making a fool of themselves. I think that's...
I think the whole thing here is obviously this is about NATO. This is about it's about Ukraine joining NATO and the US being able to push weapons and troops deployments further and further closer to Russia. That's really what this is about. And Putin doesn't want that to happen. He doesn't want Ukraine to be a part of NATO. I think the real tragedy I always find with this is that, and I've been watching some, Ukrainian soldiers being interviewed and talking about stuff, and some older Ukrainian soldiers. It is a bit of a tragedy, and particularly you see some of the footage from the villages where in Donbass the tension is there, and you've got old Soviet infrastructure and even some sort of statues and stuff still there. And it is a bit of a tragedy, not a bit of a tragedy. It's a great tragedy if you think about the fact that you've got Ukrainians and Russians now going head to head. It's just a great shame that these used to be brothers, basically fraternal brothers of the Soviet Union. And this just kind of brings us on to our next story, which obviously does tie, as you say, bringing back the Soviet legacy. But we have just passed the 30th anniversary. So the 26th of December was the 30th anniversary of the end of the Soviet Union. And or the collapse of the Soviet Union. And I think there's a nice piece here we can read or go into, which comes from the Global Times. Lessons of the Soviet Union's collapse helps China develop socialism successfully. So and this article is by Yang Sheng and Chen Qingqing, which says the US doesn't realize it's repeating the wrong path of the Soviet Union, which is interesting. I think we'll just read some bits from here. Let's take a look here. yes, so this, I mean, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but let's just cut to the valuable lesson here. Let's go to the valuable lesson. So a valuable lesson. Li Jinming, former vice president of the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, told the Global Times that there are many different explanations from around the world about why the Soviet Union collapsed. But the one which holds that Stalinism, or the socialist model of the Soviet Union, is the root cause continues to dominate. But in China, we have reached common ground after much research and many discussions that Stalinism is not the root cause, and the real reason is that from Nikita Khrushchev to Mikhail Gorbachev, the leadership of the Soviet Union gradually deviated from and eventually betrayed Marxism, socialism, and the fundamental interests of the overwhelming majority of the people, Lee noted. To blame Stalin or the socialist model built by Lenin and Stalin for the collapse of the Soviet Union is irresponsible, Lee said. Although the model was not perfect and needed reforming, the Soviet Union achieved great goals such as in industrialization, victory in World War II, and a successful post-war reconstruction under this model, Lee said. The starting point of the Soviet Union's collapse was the reform initiated by Khrushchev, because it failed to address the problems. Instead, it gradually denied the basic political and economic system of the Soviet Union's socialism, and when it came to the Gorbachev era, the leadership of the country fully betrayed Marxism and chose a path with no turning back, experts have said. The Soviet Union's leaders were not just betraying their original aspiration, but also forgot that serving the people is their core mission rather than becoming enmeshed in power struggles with other countries, bullying and threatening its comrades within the socialist bloc, including China, pursuing military expansion and even invading other countries like Afghanistan, said Chinese analysts. The Soviet Union could send satellites to space and expand its geopolitical influence sphere, but it could not fix its problems with the shortages of food, textile, and daily necessities, which further fueled social conflicts. Wang Xiangju, deputy director and research fellow at the Renmin University of China, told the Global Times.
For the record, that's just Renmin is just people, the People's University.
Renmin University, so Renmin, yeah, sure. CPC has always stressed that all our developments and achievements we gained and we are paying efforts to achieve are just for one fundamental purpose: serving the people. Yeah. The Soviet Union's leaders also wanted to fix the problems, but they mistakenly believed that liberalization or westernization could fix everything for their country. Yeah, we'll stop there. So interesting. Good. It's not a stream if I don't watch if I don't drop my notebook. We're not having a stream. That's I've noticed that I always. But yeah, we can read that. I'll continue reading that article, but you can read that there. It's on the Global Times. It's their opinion on that one. But it is, as we said, a great tragedy. And as the article says, this idea that liberalism and trying to go down the path of Gorbachev and Khrushchev. I mean, look at it now. It's really terrible to see Ukrainians and Russians going head to head. And there's another article which we can read bits from, which talks to a Russian academic. The Global Times did this interview. We're also just skirting over the absolute tragedy of the 90s, the terrible conditions, and even to this day that all Soviet people have endured. Sort of nurses having to resort to prostitution, people having to beg, food shortages, homelessness, absolute economic collapse, and probably the greatest heist in history of state assets. The state industries, all of that stuff being sold for peanuts. Sold for absolute peanuts to the lowest bidder, probably.
It's not just state assets, because in a socialist system, state assets is the people's labor, is what the people live off of. So it's this huge and disgusting act of exploitation by Western capital of, namely, all the fruits of labor of the entire Soviet people just being sold at barely any price. I mean, if I recall correctly, a military example, the technology for the F-35 vertical takeoff fighter is based off of the Yakolev 41, later renamed Yakolev 141 project, which is sold to Lockheed Martin for, I believe, only a few $100s. So there's way more example like that in all fields of automotives, agriculture, so on and so forth, anything that you can think of. So yeah, it's the 30-year anniversary. We're talking about this history. Yeah,
sure. Sure. I mean, actually, let's talk about. One second, I need my notebook. Hold on.
That will be an inside joke in the future.
The dropping of the notebook. I think we'll have to. I'll just have to
Yes.
drop it every at the start. We'll just get out of the way every week. Yeah, I mean, we're communists. We're pretty upset with the collapse of the Soviet Union. It's the 30th anniversary, but we do have lots of things to draw inspiration from. We still have many great communist countries: Cuba, China, Vietnam, North Korea, Laos, and lots of movements around the world doing lots of great stuff. Which actually brings us to an interview we had yesterday. We spoke to the General Secretary of the Communist Party of Swaziland. They're a small party, but they are fighting an absolute monarch, the last king of the last absolute monarch in Africa, King Mswati, and it's what's called Eswatini now. That party still continues to choose to call themselves the Communist Party of Swaziland, though. They don't want to validate the king by using his choice of how he calls his country without consulting his people. But we had a great interview with him, and I'm going to read a statement from them in relation to the struggle that they're going on, or that they're enduring right now. So if you haven't seen them, they're called the CPS, the Communist Party of Swaziland, and they've been holding a summer school, a school where they've been, raising the consciousness of the youth, having talks, having sessions. It's been really good to watch. I do suggest watching some of their footage. Their campaign right now is it's actually a campaign for democracy. It's even before just socialism, they're just trying to establish democratic republic and overthrow the king in their country, which is really great. And in that interview, which we will publish soon, the General Secretary does talk about the fact that the imperialists are also in that struggle. So the US, the British, the French companies particularly have relationships with the king, and they are also extracting value from that country, as well as also Taiwan, the Republic of China. That country, Eswatini, the absolute monarchy, is one of the only countries in the world that recognizes Taiwan, and the Taiwanese government, Taiwanese forces have been sending arms and have been arming this the security forces of Eswatini. And in June and July of this year, there was protests. There were protests in the country because most of the country lives in absolute poverty, while the king and the royal family lives in luxury. And people, understandably, have been getting upset and protesting against his rule, and they were crushed. The statistic that the General Secretary gave yesterday was about 100 people were killed over June and July, and some of them thrown into fires, really brutal stuff. But the important thing he said is that, the Taiwanese government, the Republic of China, have been arming and supporting this absolute monarch. And so let me just read for you the statement here from the CPS. While that one loads, so we're having some technical issues here. 1 second. I just want to hear your thoughts on that, Jen, while I load this up.
It's the exact same process that China went through. It's the kind of revolution in a in quote unquote third world country, in a colony, semi-colony, where essentially the same kind of process will play out, and I hope nothing but success for them. I mean, because one of the tragedies, as we're gonna bring up later with South Africa and all, is that the revolution, for one reason or another, was inevitable. We don't know, but for many situations where revolution stops short of full victory, and the consequence of that is that the sovereignty of the people of whatever case you're talking about in this case, is their nation, is not full, does not fully belong to them, still belongs to overseas international firms and big time imperialist capital. And so therefore the control of the resources of your land is not able to be used for the development of your own people. So that is why, and of course, the imperialists are not just gonna nicely, hand it over to you. So that is why the Revolutionary War is always necessary. China was only able to do what it was able to do because it first seized the resources capital of all the sellouts, comprador bourgeoisie, bureaucratic bourgeoisie, feudal monarchs and nobility, and then seized the property of all the Western and Japanese, of course, corporations. And that was the first kind of fund that was needed in order to start developing the country. And even then, there's still a lot of difficulties. So, I mean, I wish that one of the advantages of a communist party, of a vanguard party, and a one-party system is that you can plan for prolonged operations like that over multiples of decades, even centuries. And it's just my hope that they use that to their full advantage to be able to bring about, if nothing else, human dignity, a dignified life for all their people. Which
I'll read their statement. Yeah, I agree entirely with that one. It's good luck in their struggle. But let's just read their statement here. So the CPS says, no dialogue with the monarch. Work to unite the people for total democracy. So this is from the 24th of December. Yesterday, the 23rd of December, the CPS summer school concluded on the question of transition to democracy and also dealt with the organizational structure of communist parties, methods, and content of their work. The aim of these discussions is to help delegates better understand the position of the CPS on Swaziland's transition to democracy, particularly in light of the ongoing debates about what needs to be done now. In this transition period, the CPS stands firm on its position: no dialogue with the monarch. This position was also affirmed by the delegates at the summer school. Communists are not anti-dialogue. Dialogue in Swaziland under the current situation will only be possible if Mswati, which is the king, surrenders all his powers to the people. Mswati, Africa's last absolute monarch, has repeatedly shown that he is prepared to spill more blood to hold on to power. As such, the only dialogue that is needed at this point is dialogue among the oppressed people, focusing on devising better methods to intensify the struggle against the autocracy. On the organizational structure of communist parties, methods, and content of their work, the school undertook the following interrogations. 1. The party's role in organizing the masses. 2. The importance of quality and resilient leadership in the struggle. 3. The motive forces of the struggle in Swaziland. 4. How the party can ensure that it is with the people at all times. And 5. What needs to be done moving forward to intensify the revolution. While the party's Democracy Now! Campaign, launched in 2019, has made some key achievements thus far, delegates to the CPS summer school concede that a lot still needs to be done to organize the masses in the rural areas where over 70% of the people live. Communist activists must thus intensify their work in organizing the people from study groups and units, build the community councils as per the party's directive, and unite the people. In addition, the party's propaganda machinery must consistently work to expose the regime firmly rooted in the oppressed people's side. The regime has heavily censored the media in Swaziland. As such, activists must creatively use the various media platforms available to them, such as social media. Organizing the masses also involves mobilizing the people to use their talents to express the demands of the revolution: writing, poetry, music, and all other artistic talents. The CPS seeks to empower the people to be in charge of the revolution. The CPS, of course, has a vanguard role to play. The party must work every day to prevent opportunism, which can weaken and delay the struggle. In this regard, communist activists must expose the charlatanry of those within the progressive movement who attempt to preserve the monarch. Delegates to the CPS summer school also call for the empowerment of women to ensure that they play a leading role in the struggle. The party must campaign for the removal of structural barriers to women participating in the struggle, but also in society generally. Okay, so that's their statement. And I think coming from the last thing we just mentioned about the fall of the Soviet Union and the Global Times saying that, to serve the people is fundamental. We must always serve the people. We must never forget that part of the mission of a communist party. So again, they've also got that in their statement here, which is fundamental to a successful revolution and holding onto a successful revolution. But yeah, good luck to them. And one thing I'll mention here while we're in the stream, of course, is that if you are watching, please like, subscribe, and share this content. But if you are watching this and you are a member of a communist party, the General Secretary said to us yesterday that they are looking for help, for solidarity. It is 30 years since the end of the Soviet Union. That was a great bulwark for organizing the international communist movement and organizing oppressed peoples around the world. And it's obviously our job to try and live on that legacy and try and extend that legacy. So if you are a member, if you're watching this and you are a part of an organization, speak to your leadership and see if you can reach out to them and see how we can actually help that body fight for democracy and end the last monarchy, the last absolute monarchy in Africa, which is something that should have happened a long time ago. Yeah. So please do remember that. I think we wanted to go on then, of course, and cover the rest of the news of the CP of CPs of the world. So what communist parties are saying around the world. So the statement I will read in a moment is, of course, we had the passing of Desmond Tutu in South Africa. I'll read the Communist Party, the SACP's statement on that. Other things to mention, of course, more messages of solid. The South African Communist Party also sent a message to Gabriel Boric on his election victory in Chile, which we covered last week. Of course, some other messages from the CP of India for Desmond Tutu and other sort of more local issues. And of course, the one we mentioned about the CPS of Swaziland, that is. Next week or sometime soon, we're not sure when, we will be talking about some of the positions that some communist parties have in relation to China. So particularly the Communist Party of Sweden released a statement on the 28th, which I will just say that it has a very negative perspective on China and calling it, I suppose, a capitalist state and rallying against Deng Xiaoping. We will discuss it at some point. I'm sure Jen really wants to get into this one.
I understand. It's we cannot keep being here for another 2 hours.
No, yeah,
that's impossible.
We need to get that one. It's due course, yeah. So I think I'll read the CP statement from the South African Communist Party in relation to Desmond Tutu. So if you're not aware, Desmond Tutu did pass away this week, and he was a stalwart in the fight against apartheid. So let me read the message from the South African Communist Party here. So the SACP statement of condolences on the passing of Desmond Tutu. Dr. Bladen Zamande, the South African Communist Party General Secretary, expresses the party's sincerest condolences to the family of Desmond Tutu, 90, who passed away on Sunday the 26th. We will remember him for the work he did when he was the chairperson of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, among others. The commission was an essential part of our transition from apartheid to our current and developing democratic transition. In its final report, referred a number of cases for prosecution. A long time has now passed. There has been little progress. However, recently, the National Prosecuting Authority announced it has appointed a team of prosecutors to investigate some of those cases. This step is crucial, although it is belated. In addition, for all the families that lost their loved ones because of the actions of apartheid security and other networks to find closure, not some but all the cases and other crimes in which the apartheid regime or its networks killed people must be included in the scope of the investigation, which must be expedited given the long time that has passed. We need closure as the formerly oppressed. So if you're not aware, the TRC, Truth and Reconciliation Commission, was run by Desmond Tutu. I guess you would say it was an experiment on how to deal with atrocities and trying to build a new country where you had such a crime as apartheid and all of the state activities of executions and torture that were conducted by the state security agents, and they were given amnesty if they came and confessed their crimes to the families in a public forum, which if you go on YouTube, you can watch. Pretty harrowing stuff to see policemen describe what they did to young activists, torture and murder, and their families sitting there right there. But Desmond Tutu did play a very, very positive, fundamentally good role in ending apartheid and being a very charismatic voice. If you've ever seen some of his speeches, go and watch some of his speeches. He's a very funny man. He's got a very, let's say, contagious laugh. A great man. But I wouldn't say I agree with all of his politics. He wasn't perfect in his later years. Let's just say that. We'll leave that. But we'll not talk. We'll not talk ill of the recently past. Let's just say that. The next thing we want to talk about is Chile. Chile's constitution has, obviously, they are going to repeal it. So Boric, I hope that's how his name is pronounced, was elected last week as the president, 35-year-old former student leader. And the constitution of Chile was written under Pinochet. So they are repealing this constitution. Any thoughts on that, Jin?
Well, I mean, he is the person, the new president, to say that neoliberalism started in Chile, and it will end in Chile.
Right.
Okay, yeah, there's lots of references, philosophical statements that you can say about that. But of course, you have to rewrite the Constitution. I mean, it's Pinochet of all people, the man infamous for throwing people off of helicopter, for God's sake. So well done. I mean, please do that as quickly as possible, I guess.
Yeah.
It's like Hitler wrote a constitution, and need I say more? I mean, come on.
Yeah, I think that's a good perspective on this. It's not exactly the most revolutionary act. We're repealing the Pinochet constitution. Okay, well done. That's You still had that?
Not to discredit them, not at all. It's just
No, I mean, great. Well done. Ironic. No, it's a very mild. Mild is not even the word. Glaringly obvious thing that needs to be fixed. I'm sure we'll hear more about their new constitution, which will not be based on Pinochet's constitution. Let's move on to the last two stories then we've got. So one is a slave ship that was in Alabama, and one about Mother Teresa, this Mother Teresa charity, which has been shut down in India. Thoughts on the charity there, Jin?
Well, I mean, there's lots of statements that came out about Mother Teresa's whole operation, even when she was alive. Horror stories about the one that I'm most familiar with that I read years ago was the how they were like trying to stick to like the biblical times, and so were their standards of sanitation. It was absolute horror stories of how there was no disinfection of any medical equipment, be it a wrapping cloth, bandage, or needles. It was just hand washed with warm water, and that's it. Oh, and I'm sure there are others. There was this one about how they didn't let the patients use painkillers, so that forces them to confess, to the religion. And so we got to look at this dialectically. On the one hand, India under Modi, like what on earth, just straight up Hindu fascist.
I think that's
absolute. Just straight up fascism.
I think there's sort of two things we need to mention that, as you said, there's the topic of Mother Teresa and Christian-backed and fundamentalist, actually, charities on one hand, and then you have Indian government, as you call it, Hindu fascism that many people have been describing. There's sort of two things happening at once. So this charity is being shut down. So let's just to clarify, Indian government ends key foreign fund source for charity. So just to clarify what exactly happened, the Indian government on Monday refused to renew a permission that is vital for Mother Teresa's missionaries of charity to be able to secure foreign funds, cutting off a key source the charity has depended on to run its program. So it's not banning it, but it cutting off its main form of funding. So yes, the narrative that's that we have to sort of mention here is that Modi is behind or is driving this big Hindu nationalism thing going on right now. So people are seeing this as an attack on Christianity in the country. So and there is a lot of truth to this. There have been attacks of people in churches, Hindu nationalism going into churches and disrupting.
I believe that. I believe that's definitely true.
Yeah, and also against Muslims too. So there's been a lot of attacks on Muslims and that stuff. So these things are both happening. So it's important.
Yeah. So on the one hand,
but not any way supporting Modi on this one.
At
the same time, that we do want to mention. I mean, we should share our opinions on fundamentalist charities that have caveats and certain habits. As you
I want to mention a few things. One is that people in India join other religions to basically escape the persecution of the absolutely grotesque caste system, which is like more feudal than feudalism. What on earth even is that? But anyways, and this caste system is being kept alive as now being turned into this Hindu fascist kind of ethos that is keeping the Modi government alive. And of course, the people. Of course, there are people of India that's fighting against it. All the various communist parties of India is a very obvious example. And for them to persecute Christians, that is almost not surprising. Like you said, they've done it with Muslims. They've done it with the Sikh people. They've done it with any other people under the sun, really. So, but at the same time, the Teresa legacy specifically, there was like this conflict with China as well, where China does not allow Mother Teresa's charity to open up in China and does not recognize it. Namely, it has nothing to do with Catholic theology or philosophy. It has to do with colonialism and the kind of how the kind of even Lenin talked about the revolutionariness of early Christianity, right? But the corrupted Christianity that literally just became we were talking about the slave ship in Alabama that was unearthed as well, just became slavery Bible that was perverted for the purpose of imperialism and the colonial project.
Let me just throw in one quick quote. A quote from Desmond Tutu. You just reminded me, since he's just passed. He has a famous quote which ties exactly what you're saying, that when they landed, the settlers, the colonialists, when they landed, they had the Bible and we had the land. And when they left, or after a few years, we had the Bible and they had the land. Right. So, just to jump in there, as a tool of imperialism and colonialism. Yeah, go ahead. So, go on.
Yeah, so the corrupted Christianity basically tells the people of any number, name a non-Euro-American country, to say that, hey, you must give up and wait for some Catholic or Protestant or whatever missionary to come save you. I mean, I remember in Catholic school, people went to this Habitat and Humanity, right? That they were partnered up with. They are a project that builds houses for all the needed people. And one of the projects was obviously you get a free trip to some African country and build that stuff up. And from what I've heard years later on from people in Africa, they told me that those houses, like they move, it's literally just like a tourism activity. How so? Well, all the building materials are like laid ready in stockpiles right there. Your rich colonial white kid goes there, who does not know how to build houses, by the way. Slaps these pieces of wood together in like a very, very much unsafe form to where it has been developed into a custom in those places now, where like right after these white kids leave, they tear everything down and rebuild it up to spec.
Right.
so that's actually livable,
Sure.
safe
So
for
it is,
human
it is, it is more of
habitation.
a tourism, yeah, a function of
Right. So, like,
moral
we
tourism.
again, we must be dialectical, and as dialecticians, we must see both sides of the coin, right? So
Mm,
the revolutionariness of the Christian theology, and then its perversion, the colonial Bible,
sure,
and
sure.
then the in India specifically, the persecution of Christians due to just straight up fascism and feudalism, and
Right.
superstition, and also the fact that the Teresa legacy is also not the greatest, even if you're a Christian. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think you made some good points there. I mean, there is certainly, as you said, Lenin mentioned the revolutionary potential of Christianity, and
mhm,
even guys at the CPI, the Center for Political Innovation, have released a
mhm,
book. Jesus was a socialist. There's
yeah,
certainly some good to be taken from that and to be used in that, and revolutionary
mhm,
potential, let's say. But yes, talking in the specifics, as you said, there's a Hindu nationalist element to the story. There's and Mother Teresa's charities themselves. I think my only sort of final thoughts on this one is that I do
mhm,
recall there's the famous story that, Mother Teresa, I think it was in an interview, I'm not sure, she says, it came out that they would not use morphine or painkillers and give them
mhm,
to people who are suffering on their deathbed because they found that it was God's way or something like this, and they were more likely to convert or confess on their deathbeds if they were in pain. Which, if you think about it, is basically torturing
it's
people
torture.
to make
Yeah,
it's torture. It's torturing people so that they can join your religion, which is not great. But
yeah.
yeah, let's go into our final story, which talking about colonial legacies and imperial legacies. The slave ship. So let me just push it up for us. So this is in Alabama on 1 second. Second, probably yeah. So this was found in Alabama. The ship is called the Clotilda. So the last known slave ship is actually very well preserved. Okay, so it's not been discovered now, but they're talking about whether they want to actually unearth this thing. So the particularly detail that I think that's interesting about this is that it arrived in Alabama in 1860, and it had 110 people on board. So it just gives you that perspective of how recent slavery was/is.
Mhm.
I think it came from Benin. I'm just checking here. So they found it in 2019, just to clarify. And I should clarify. I think it was Benin. Yeah, Benin. Yeah, so it made the journey from Benin to Mobile in 1860. So if we consider that it would have dropped off, its cargo, some people in that time, and someone of that cargo lived to be 80 years old, that means there was someone, a direct sort of a person from Africa who was then taken on a ship and would have died in around 1940. So knowing our grandparents, so someone who would have hung around with your grandparents or been an old person when your grandparents were
Yeah.
kids when they were young, that's
Mhm.
quite, that's very recent. That's fresh history.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're talking about potentially unearthing this ship,
Mhm.
and it has a bunch of barrels and bits that, and they're also saying potentially genetic material that they can then do some tests and find the relatives of people that who are alive today who are on that ship. But
Mhm.
yeah, quite an interesting story, quite an interesting piece of
Yeah.
history there that's just come up from Alabama, the
Mhm.
Clotilda. Hmm. Okay. So I think those are all our main stories. So we've
Mhm.
covered everything. I've dropped my notebook, so we have done a full stream.
Yes.
Uh, this is obviously the last one we'll do for the year, and we'll be back in the new year to do
Yeah.
more news, to more to cover more things.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts for the week, Jen? Or any final thoughts for the end of the year?
Yeah. Well, this is definitely a year where, past 2 years really, that the entire paradigm of the world has been just shifted and completely changed,
Mm,
unrecognizable.
mhm,
And
mhm.
going into the future, I mean, obviously for the material things, MTT next year is going to have an explosive growth with our website, We're going to have incredible amount of education programs and new episodes, and we're also going to have merchandise, which is going to be fun. And from a more macro perspective, it's like Lenin said, how do you know a revolution is happening? Well, a revolution is in years where decades happen because of the quantitative and qualitative development of history. We are in, every single one of us, the qualitative stage of it. And I think that we communists should not just stand idly by and observe everything, but as Lenin said, become the protagonist of history. That's the note I want to leave everyone off at. And I want to wish everyone Happy New Year's. Beautiful. Only one day ahead of time.
Sure. Yes, so you are. Yes, yeah, great stuff to end on. And just to echo some of the things there that Jen's mentioned, please do, if you can, go onto Patreon and join. Even if you just come on as a $5 member, you will be gaining access to some of the stuff that we'll be releasing later on in the year. So our communiversity that one of our comrades is working on, as well as Jen mentioned, some merchandise, as well as voting rights and various other pieces, which we'll organize with you once you join. It also does help us pay for these exorbitantly expensive subscriptions to the New York Times, the Financial Times.
You even just access the article because quite literally without literal money, you just can't see them. You can see a title, you can see less than one paragraph, and that's it.
Yeah. We have to pay. So all of the articles, if you have watching this and you've seen some of the articles, of course, it's New York Times. You can't see any of that. Most of the stuff that we showed today. So
and that's the main reason. One of the main reasons that we haven't been leaving links in our read more description down below, because you got to pay for them. What's the point in that?
Well, right. So exactly. So most of the stuff that we put up here, apart from Global Times, is behind paywalls. So if you want, if you have access to all of that, we can put the links. But to be honest, most people don't pay for most of the stuff that we're sharing. So subscribe and help us so that we can actually access more. We'd like to pay for some more subscriptions, but we need some more Patreons. But yes, thank you, comrades, for watching, and we will see you in the new year. Happy New Year. And also, final note, just do go and contact your party if you are in a party and see if you can help the CPS in some way with their struggle against the monarchy. Maybe we can start 2022 with toppling the last king of Africa. Who knows? Maybe not start, but have a cheat. But anyway, on that note, thank you very much, comrades, and we'll see you next year.
All right. Bye-bye.